Thanks for staying with us here on The Real Story. We've been talking about the upcoming Juneteenth, what many mark as a day of independence and liberation. But in order to be liberated from racial trauma, culturally affirming healing, research, and informed care is needed. Joining us now to talk about Hartford Healthcare's new Center for Research on Racial Trauma and Community Healing, Dr. Javeed Sukhera, Chief of Psychiatry. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So the Institute of Living has been around for, I believe, 200 years now, a really long time. We know a lot has changed in the field, obviously, since then. You know, our understanding of mental health, especially how we understand race's impact on, and, you know, collective trauma. So there's been a lot of advancement, but still a lot to bring attention to. What's sort of the goal here now with the new center and with the Institute of Living?
Well, the Institute of Living is celebrating 200 years, and it was founded on a very simple idea that people who are struggling or suffering deserve humane and dignified treatment. So as we find ourselves at this cross-section in history, what we know is that there's a lot of people in our community who are suffering and struggling with the pain of things like racial trauma, who have experienced racism persistently and intergenerationally, and that's left wounds that impact people's well-being and ability to function. To be able to be better attuned to that, we're deciding that we want to reinvest what we're doing in healthcare into the communities we serve. And so the center is focused on understanding and addressing racial trauma, but it's also really starting with the understanding that healing happens in and through community, which means people shouldn't have to come to a place to seek healing, but rather be able to heal on their own with supports.
Right. And when we talk about racial trauma and the way it can manifest, as you were saying, physically and mentally for people, you know, one aspect is discrimination now and a fight for equity and personhood, and the other is history, as you were saying, generational, and people maybe having a lot of missing pieces there. You know, have you seen this puzzle impacting or manifesting in residents?
Absolutely. So the impacts of historical trauma are traced intergenerationally and even genetically through space, time, and memory. There are things that people's ancestors experienced that we still carry with us. Our goal, though, is to really make this about not so much the pain that has been carried through the years, but the amazing transcendence and healing and growth that has happened through the years. So it's really about shifting the narrative to honor and acknowledge the pain and trauma of history while also acknowledging the healing ways and traditions of ancestors.
And you mentioned the community healing priority, you know, really kind of the whole point of the and focus of this center. You're already doing things like culturally affirming support groups. You know, tell me about the difference that can make for people.
Well, there's a huge change when people have access to supports that truly see and affirm who they are. It creates the kind of space that people can bring their full selves and really feel comfortable and safe enough to build a relationship. Much of traditional mental health services haven't really been built in a culturally affirming way, and that's why what we're seeking to do is co-design how we do that with the communities that we're serving.
Gotcha. And this is something we know you and your colleagues, you know, come up against a lot and are really trying to chip away at. Hispanic, Asian Pacific Islander, Black communities in particular, you know, have a strong stigma of therapy, and a lot of people have an aversion to it when it comes to mental health. You know, how have you been shifting that here in Hartford specifically?
So I think we have to start by recognizing that it's not so much that there are specific communities that might have a stigma, it's that we have to make our existing services worthy of people feeling like they can build up the courage to ask for help.
Right.
So we have to take our work and our role very seriously and honor the fact that our job is to actually create services where people who are struggling or suffering feel like they can come to when they need help because they know that they'll be honored and centered, dignified, and listened to.
And here in Hartford, you know, and many other diverse cities and towns across Connecticut, there's this collective trauma, especially because of increased rates of violence and incarceration. We definitely see that a lot here in Hartford. And we've seen more and more in political conversations from city halls to the Capitol here, how this is really affecting youth and impacting their education, their ability to break cycles. I know you work a lot with youth. When it comes to community healing, are there any paths that you're researching or things that you want to see adopted, specifically when it comes to youth?
Well, let me start by saying when it comes to our powers that be, we're going to put some heat to them and really challenge them to walk the walk. There's been a lot of talk in the city and region, and I think that we're still seeing systemic issues that need to be addressed, and that's part of healing. But when it comes to young people, I think we have to honor their wisdom. So one of the ideas that we're trying to get together is something called a social innovation lab, a place where young people in our community, particularly racially minoritized young people, will come, learn, get training, but then get resources to implement ways to enhance well-being in their communities with seed funding, resources, and support.
And we know some of that action is happening, right within Hartford Healthcare. We've been talking about mental, and emotional well-being. How important is it to also have those community partnerships too?
They mean everything. They mean everything. We are here in the heart of the state capitol, and the Institute of Living has been here for a very long time. But it's really important for us to remember that the communities that surround us, many communities that have been affected by trauma and violence, really deserve and need a reinvestment and re-engagement to ensure that what we do is of service to them.
And we know when it comes to physical, bodily health, illness, disease, race impacts a lot of that as well. And the medical field has also often been behind and really faced, discrimination in how they respond and treat people. How does racially informed healthcare fit into the new center's purpose?
Well, a big part of what we're seeking to do is really change the way we train and educate health professionals so that when someone's coming through the doors of a traditional healthcare setting, they're meeting with and interacting with a health professional who understands the trauma that they might have experienced, is attuned to the way that trauma influences their physical health and their interaction, and works with them to create that healing space. Doing that through and with community allows us to really help health professionals recognize that no matter how hard they try, how well-intentioned they might be, we might be, that we can sometimes be a part of the problem, and so we can be empowered to be part of the solution.
And do you find that you have a lot of colleagues who are interested in gaining that as part of their training, or some who have maybe even been in the field for years, not just those who are up and coming, but those who are maybe saying, hey, this is something I'd like to go back and learn more about?
We are. And I think that's what's amazing about many of us who work in healthcare, is that despite how hard it is to come face to face with some of the ways in which we can be potentially harmful, people who work in caring professions really want to be part of the solution. And they know that the needs of the person that they're serving have to come first. And so there's a willingness, a growth mindset, particularly in Hartford Healthcare, to learn more and be better.
And you all are working with new technology, some new AI to kind of oversee and correct doctor bias and discrimination. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we have a really exciting partnership with MIT, with Hartford Healthcare, where we're mapping the electronic health record using artificial intelligence to trace through where stigmatizing and biased language might be used and link that to outcomes and clinical decisions. What that will allow us to do is be able to train health professionals to be better at recognizing bias at its roots and therefore recognizing some of the biased ways they might practice and correcting them, providing more equitable and dignified care.
Right. And is there anything you would say to those in the community who maybe have a lack of trust with medical professionals and those in your positions?
Well, we have to do something to earn their trust. And so I think it's important that we acknowledge some of the harm and trauma that many racialized communities have experienced from healthcare, but also recognize that we can only work towards a future where we work together and co-design where we're going, and that we're here to walk hand in hand with folks to build that trust and earn it.
Yeah, and have you gotten any sort of feedback? I know you mentioned how important community partnerships are. Have you gotten any feedback from those community advocates of any things they want you all to be doing on the medical professional side?
Yeah, so they were with us hand in hand in designing and constructing what the center was supposed to be about.
Right.
So there's been a lot of gratitude and appreciation, but what we also know is that we all collectively have a kind of righteous impatience. So we're not just going to rest on our laurels and talk about things in a self-congratulatory way. We need to keep the heat to keep working, to do better, to be better, and to be accountable.
And for anyone, watching or wondering about the work that's being done here, what are the main conversations you hope this initiative either starts or stokes or keeps going?
I think at the core, for anyone who might be struggling or suffering, or who knows the pain and the wounds of being excluded or discriminated against, I want them to know that it's not their fault, and that they are worthy, and that they deserve better, that they know and are wired to heal, and our job is to be here to help support them and to help co-create space where they can honor the amazing power that they have to make it through.
And if people want to learn more about this, if they need support or want to know more about these resources, what should they know? Where can they go?
Really simple. It's instituteofliving.org/racial trauma, and that'll take them right to some resources.
Perfect. Well, Doctor, thank you so much again for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me and for drawing awareness.
Of course. So that does it for us here now on The Real Story. But if you want to watch these segments again, you can head to fox61.com or download the free Fox 61 News app and watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61 or streaming on Fox 61 Plus. Have a great morning.